Hey, welcome back. In this section, we're going to be talking about character development. This is a pretty big undertaking. It tends to be something that's uncomfortable for those that I serve. It's interesting to me that when I do an assessment, one of the things that I will ask my clients are, what are their strengths? And then correspondingly, I'll ask, what are your weaknesses? So, strengths are positive attributes or qualities about yourself. Weaknesses are things that you struggle with or things that you genuinely don't like about yourself. So it's interesting to me that people will tell me the most painful and horrible experiences of their lives, often without any hesitation at all. But when I ask them, what are your strengths? All of a sudden, they become very uncomfortable and really struggle to identify or to speak things that they appreciate and like about themselves. So whenever I see that, I have a sense that the person is conflicted and perhaps has not been taught to have really positive self-worth. And what I'll say to them is that this is a choice. And so one of the themes throughout this course is we're identifying things that we were taught about ourselves. We're identifying ways in which we were made to feel about ourselves. And then we are consciously choosing what is going to be our truth, what do we choose to embody. And we don't have to frantically search for what is there. We can simply look at a given set of positive attributes and decide which ones we want to embody. Some of those might take a lot of work or a lot of change, but they are choices. And I think that is the most vital piece that I wish I had known much earlier in life. So there's a few deal breakers that I'm going to suggest to you in terms of if what you're looking for is a manageable, goal-driven life, if what you're looking for is something that is healthy and sustainable, then there's a few deal breakers. And they may seem obvious, but I say that there's still choices and there are things that have to be chosen very consciously. So the most basic of these is choosing to be an honest person. And the importance of that, from a clinical standpoint, is not that you be necessarily honest with others, but it is vital that we be honest with ourselves. Because if we do not trust ourselves, our ability to determine who is trustworthy is severely compromised. And I have yet to find anything in this life worth lying to myself about. I have found that always creates friction and conflict and hardship for me. So I encourage people to always be honest with themselves. I remind them that they have every right to privacy. They do not necessarily have to share things about themselves. And my hope is that a little bit at a time, through increased mindfulness, we notice a lot of the white lies that we tell ourselves. So white lies are, I'm not angry, that doesn't bother me, I'm fine. Rigorous honesty with self ought to be the goal. The next attribute that I urge folks to choose is integrity. Be a person who does what you say you will do. Be a person who manages responsibility, and pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but pretty vital. I urge folks to have self-respect and to have dignity. And I remind them that you don't have to change how you feel. You don't have to like someone to respect them. Respect and fairness are really foundational to building a life. They are conducive to building a better relationship. I don't react well or want to get to know people who are disrespectful to me. I encourage folks, of course, to work hard and to choose to be a hard worker, particularly towards their own goals. Passive approaches and frankly doing things in a half-assed fashion just doesn't work for us. I encourage folks to have courage. And what I find is that very often they already have it, but they don't identify that. In our culture, I think we think about courage as the absence of fear, which is not at all true. It isn't brave if you're not scared. As simple as that is, I think a lot of us are missing the point. Again, being self-aware, practicing mindfulness, choosing to pay attention to self. I urge folks to practice accountability in all times and places. When I am wrong, I promptly admit it. When I have made a mistake, I own it. What I find is the type of people that grow and enter different forms of recovery tend to be very resilient, and I think that that too can be a choice. Um, as the adage goes, I'm not as much interested in how many times you got knocked down as how many times you got back up. I encourage folks to be genuine, to be very authentic. And those to find such folks is relatively rare in my experience. But I find them very commonly amongst people who are in different types of recovery, whether it's trauma, mental illness, addiction. People like me, when we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's when we change. And if we allow ourselves to embrace a little bit of vulnerability and just to be who we really are and not pretend to be something we're not, we tend to make far more meaningful connections and far deeper relationships with others. And of course, I'm going to encourage folks to be true to themselves, because we are people who will readily sacrifice or readily play small, denying our own needs, and these just don't serve us. So to me, that is a list of deal breakers. I hope that everything about that seems reasonable and achievable. I've never met someone that was incapable of those things. I've met a lot of people who believe they were. So the next aspect of character development means moving away from roles. Roles are the relationships that we have with others. I think we tend to have a far greater awareness of who we are to other people than who we are to ourselves. So roles are pretty basic in terms of I am a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I am an employer, I'm a lot of different things, right? But those all describe who I am to other people. In the same vein, I have a lot of attributes that describe how I am with other people. So I can say that I'm compassionate, I can say that I am kind, I am a good friend to have, I'm a good listener, I'm someone who's good to have in your corner, especially if there's a crisis. Those are all attributes and talents that I have, but they are primarily describing how I am in relating to others. There are plenty of attributes and standalone abilities and talents that are just yours, right? They don't describe how you are with others. Intelligence is at the top of that list. It's one more thing that folks are usually uncomfortable saying about themselves is that they're smart. And I remind folks that for a lot of us, especially those of us who grew up scared, a lot of us got misdiagnosed with learning disabilities or put in resource rooms. Intelligence is really about a person's capacity to learn. It is not measured by grades. Performance is measured by grades. Intelligence is something that I think we can readily claim, along with intuitiveness, empathy, curiosity, having a desire to learn, being spiritual, and countless others that are just ours, right? They're not who we are to other people, they're just who we are and talents that we have. And it's uncomfortable to recognize those for most of us. Some attributes of your character can be specific abilities. So being a person who's creative or crafty, being a person who's frugal, being someone who can write well, being a good cook, being someone who's funny, being artistic, being a good singer, a good dancer, a good musician. These are talents and things that can obviously be further developed, but it's one more way that we tend to water ourselves down. We're afraid of appearing arrogant, we're afraid of seeming narcissistic, and so we tend to be less than complimentary in not just how we speak of ourselves, but actually in how we think and believe about ourselves. There's also a really quirky thing that I've noticed for a lot of years now. People who live with mental illness, people who are in recovery from addiction, eating disorders, and self-harm, people like me tend to have an artistic or creative talent. And I've just consistently found that wherever I find mental illness, I expect to find some degree of talent creatively and artistically. And very often that hasn't been developed, but there is some potential there, some aptitude there that is really cool and well worth investing in. I want to make a distinction real quick because when we talk about character and self-esteem and self-worth, there's one of the things that I almost never even hear therapists talking about is the concept of having self-efficacy. So even people who have really poor self-worth can still have high self-efficacy. Efficacy is having confidence or faith in a specific ability or a particular trait. So even a person who thinks very poorly of themselves in terms of their worth can recognize, yes, I'm very good at writing, or yes, I'm very smart. And efficacy is always something that we can build on. If we can seek opportunities to further build upon our strengths, I think that is a very pragmatic approach to changing how one feels about ourselves. Conversely, exploring those false beliefs, identifying things that aren't true about ourselves, will take us a long way towards positive self-worth. There are literally hundreds of attributes that you are free to claim and embody. And again, maybe you haven't been this way. Maybe you haven't been a generous person to this point. But if you care to be one, nobody can stop you. You are free to practice that. If you practice it long enough, it will become a habit. Even something as basic as tipping well when you dine in restaurants. I appreciate good service. I know that servers depend on tips, and I'm a big believer in being generous when I receive good service. A few more just off to share with you: being enthusiastic, being imaginative, outgoing, supportive, being a person who's accepting of others, being a person who can be silly and just be in the moment and have fun, being a person who is cheerful or charismatic, being a person who's charming, polite, sensitive, self-disciplined. That's a really cool one to choose. Becoming a person who is confident, dedicated, loyal, becoming a person who is innovative, sincere, being a strong person. A lot of us identify with that one. Being somebody who is hopeful or sensible, being someone who's passionate. It's one of my all-time favorite Facebook memes. Make no mistake, I am batshit passionate. I like being a person who's very expressive. I like being a person who has very strong feelings and convictions. All of these are choices. It is a choice to be a person who is flexible, to be a person who is focused, to be a person who seeks opportunities for joy, countless others. All of these are individual attributes. All of those are yours for the choosing. You can do something as basic as Google personality traits and characteristics, and you are free to choose those for yourself. It will take a lot of practice, but it's well worth doing. It's more about living consciously than just kind of bumbling our way through life, wondering who we are. Identity is a choice. It takes practice, it takes self-discipline, it takes a lot of support, but it is eminently achievable. And so if we think about it in the simplest possible terms, what do you want to add to your life? What do you want to add to your way of being? And what do you need to remove? And in the next section, we'll be talking about the things that maybe you want to remove.